Hi, me and Dylan are presenting the Connors 4th edition or the Connors 4 today. Now, to introduce it, the Connors 4th edition or the Connors 4 was created in 2022 as the revised version of the Connors 3. The Connors 4 is used to measure symptoms of ADHD in children from ages 6 to 18. The purpose of the Connors 4 is to assess symptoms of ADHD. It helps to find the severity of the ADHD and the type of ADHD, such as inattentive, hyperactive, etc. And it also measures for any disorders or issues that frequently occur alongside ADHD, including like generalized anxiety disorder or depression. And there are three versions of the Connors 4. One version is for teachers to fill out about a specific child. One form is for parents to fill out about their child or caregivers, and one is a self-report measure meant for the child to fill out on their own, and that one is meant for children ages 6 from that one is meant for children ages 8 to 18 years old, while the teacher and the parent versions are meant for children from 6 to 18 years old. So a little bit of a different age range there. For the attributes, the Connors 4 it measures for symptoms of hyperactivity, inattention, impulsivity, executive executive dysfunction, emotional dysregulation, depressed mood, and anxious thoughts. The Connors 4 also measures symptoms from the DSM for different disorders, and these include DSM symptoms from ADHD inattentive, ADHD hyperactive/impulsive symptoms are also measured for, and then it measures for the total amount of ADHD symptoms, and then some comorbid disorders that often occur alongside ADHD. It measures for oppositional defiant disorder, and it also measures symptoms for conduct disorder. And the groups that worked on the Connors 4 The Connors original Connors assessment was developed by Dr. C. Keith Connors, and then he worked with Multi Health Systems Incorporated, and Multi Health Systems Incorporated developed the actual Connors 4, and they were able to actually work with Dr. Connors while revising the Connors 3 to turn it into the Connors 4. But unfortunately, Dr. Connors passed away in 2017 before the Connors 4 was published in 2022, but his work in the field does live on through this assessment. And for administration, the person who is the respondent, fills out the questionnaire on their own in a quiet setting with few distractions. And this test can be administered online or using a paper and pencil format. And the test can either be administered in person or it can be administered remotely by the administrator sending a secure email with access to the test so they can take it at home. But this is a last resort considering it does sort of mess with the fidelity of the test if the person is taking it completely on their own at home. And if needed, the test can be administered verbally if the person either has trouble reading or they have vision issues or they might not be able to write. And then for the administration time, there aren't any time limits, but it must be completed in one sitting. For the parent form, the time to fill it out usually ranges from 10 to 25 minutes, and it averages about 15 minutes usually. For the teacher, it ranges from 10 to 20 minutes with an average of 12 minutes. And finally, for the self-report form, it ranges from 10 to 25 minutes with an average of about 15 minutes. And then here are a few of the forms. This one is the Dylan, this first one's the teacher form, right? Or the parent form? Okay,
The
thank you.
first one's the teacher, yeah.
Thank you. The recording on Zoom is covering it up. But so this first one's the teacher form, and it just shows like what they're all supposed to fill out. And then you can fill out the subject you're filling it out for, their date of birth, and the gender and age of the child you're filling it out for. And then here are a few of the items. It's measured on a 4-point scale from 0 to 3. And some of the items include if they're defiant, and these items you answer not true at all, just a little true, pretty much true, or very much true, based on the behavior of the child in the past month. And then, so not true at all is 0, and very much true is 3. And for the first item, it's defiant, and you would answer not true at all to very much true. Restless and squirmy, forgets things he/she had already learned. Feelings getting easily hurt. Fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistake in schoolwork, work, or other activities. And these obviously fall under some of the different subtests, such as inattentive symptoms or hyperactive symptoms. And then the second form is the parent form. And you can see here's some examples of some of the response items on there. And it again measures from not at all true to very true, very much true. And some of these items include restless in the squirmy sense, destructive, daydreams, difficulty in learning, steals, fails to finish things, just some varying items to measure symptoms of ADHD and other symptoms. And then here is the child version of the form. It again measures from rarely true to very often, and this is the form the child would fill out on their own, and they would measure how often their behavior applied in the past month. And then some of these items include feel restless, don't follow through on instructions, and fail to finish work, talk excessively, lose things necessary for tasks and activities, blurt out answers before questions have been completed, and easily distracted. And then for the first part of the procedure, you'd make sure that whoever's filling out the form, you would want to receive informed consent from the child's guardian or the teacher, or no, you would want to receive informed consent from the child's guardian. And then if the child is filling out the form, you would want to receive consent from them as well. And then you would want to ensure that the participant has the proper tools to take the test in whatever format they're taking it in, whether it's online or on paper. Online, you would want reliable connection to internet and a computer. And then for paper and pencil, you would want to ensure that they have the test materials and that they have a pencil to use. And then you would want to ensure that they take the test in a quiet place with few distractions. And then next, you will finally get to explaining what the participant needs to do to complete the form. And then you would want to explain why they were asked to complete the evaluation in the first place. And then you should explain that they should not compare the child to other children if it's the teacher or the parent. And then you would want to explain to the child that they should not compare themselves to other children, just take the test and apply behaviors and see how the behaviors apply specifically to them in the past month. And you should explain that the evaluation is asking them to describe either themselves if they are the child, or describe the child if the teacher or parent is taking the test. After the test, you would want to thank the participant for their time and ask if they have any comments or questions. And then for the rating scale, I already explained this earlier, but I'll kind of go over again since we're going to be moving on to the subtests. For each subtest, it would be rated on a 4-point scale from 0 to 3. And the scores again are in the past month. 0 is in the past month, this was not true at all. 1 in the past month, this was just a little true. 2 in the past month, this was pretty much true. And for 3 in the past month, this was completely true. And then for the subtest, the first subtest is response style analysis. Now, this is not made up of questions or anything that the actual respondent would fill out. This is analyzing how the respondent responded to stuff. So it would include like whether they omitted items, if they were answering questions inconsistently, and their pace, just to see how accurate their responses are and to see if there's possibly any further testing needed if they weren't answering questions as accurately as they should have been. And then the next subtest is the critical items. Now, these can be excluded if need be because some of these questions are potentially very triggering for a child, and they include questions on severe conduct. And then it also includes self harm critical items, and then there's also a sleep problems indicator. And then for the next domain, it is content scales. And the subtests include inattention slash executive dysfunction, hyperactivity, impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, depressed mood, and anxious thoughts. And then for the next group of subtests, for the next domain, it's impairment and functional outcome scales. And these subtests include schoolwork, parent interactions, and family life for the parent and self reports. And then for the next domain, it is the DSM symptom scales. And the subtests include the ADHD inattentive symptoms, ADHD hyperactive slash impulsive symptoms, total ADHD symptoms, oppositional defiant disorder symptoms, and conduct disorder symptoms. And then I'm going to give it to Dylan.
For the next subtest, the Connors 4 ADHD index contains 12 items from the Connors 4 that best distinguishes youth with a clinical diagnosis of ADHD from youth in the general population. For additional questions, the impact of symptoms in functional domains is considered. Other concerns are considered, and the strengths and skills of the student or child are also considered. And then we put just some questions that are commonly asked on the Connor rating scale, such as how often do you struggle with temper outbursts? How often do you fail to pay close attention to details? How often do you feel restless? How often do you fail to follow through on instructions? How often do you forget to listen when spoken to directly? And how often do you struggle to stay seated? As just some questions to consider. And for the scoring aspect, the Connor 4 is scored using the MHS Online Assessment Center Plus. The tests are taken online are scored automatically, while scores from tests taken by hand with pencil and paper need to be entered into the MHS Online Assessment Center Plus system before it is scored manually. For the interpretations of the results, for the raw score, higher scores indicate higher severity of symptoms, but they are converted into T-scores because they are not easily compared to other scores. For the T-scores and the percentiles for those, very elevated are shown to be 70 and over, and then 98th percentile and over. Elevated is shown to be 65 to 69, and 93rd to 97th percentile. Slightly elevated is 60 to 64 and 84 to 92nd percentile. For average, 40 to 59 and 16th to 83rd percentile. And for low, under 40 and under the 16th percentile. And this is just an example of a sample interpretive data from a Connors 4 assessment. As you can see, it mentions the same T-scores we were talking about, as well as the guidelines for the elevated and average, very elevated, and you can see the corresponding percentiles and the T-scores with those and how those kind of go through. Back like when we were talking about the subtests, such as the impairment and the content and the DSM. For the reliability, it has excellent internal consistency with the normative sample showing that the parent is 0.94 and the range is 0.97 to 0.98. For teacher reports, it's 0.95 with the range of 0.81 to 0.98. And for the student or the child self-report, zero point 0.9 with a range of 0.77 to 0.96. And then for the ADHD reference sample, the parent was shown to be 0.93 with a range of 0.86 to 0.97. The teacher's reports were 0.95 with a range of 0.81 to 0.98. And then the student or child self-reports to 0.88 to 0.71 or 0.88 and then the range was 0.71 to 0.95. And then once again, this is just a little sample of the report. And as you can see, it mentions the T-scores percentiles and then in comparison with the norms data and the entered um, combined data for the student themselves. The I believe the green boxes show the norms and then the triangle shows like the kind of interaction with the actual scores or the sample scores here. For the reliability, continued, that there is excellent test retest reliability between the two test sessions, different test sessions, sorry. There is higher inter-rater reliability between different parents rating the same child, and moderate to high inter-rater reliability between different teachers rating the same child in the same testing format. For validity, the internal structure of confirmatory factor analysis, or CFA, results supported Connors force scale structures. The relational, or the relation to conceptual related constructs, sorry. There were strong correlations between the Connors 4 and related constructs, such as the Connors 3, the Basque 3, the CEFI, and the WFIRS, thus supporting convergent validity. Continuing on with validity, the relation to criteria and variables, there were different groups tested and had different score profiles, sorry. For example, people with ADHD and higher scores than the general population tested, and the group that had depression or anxiety. The classification accuracy for the Connors 4 scores were able to correctly place youth into the general population, one of the types of ADHD, the depression group, the generalized anxiety group, and or the oppositional defiant disorder group. For the standardized sample, parents and teachers raters primarily did it remotely, while the youth or the self-reported norm sample completed the test in person locally, usually at the administrator's office. The raters were located in the US and Canada, and they did indicate that they could read English either very well or well. And for the parents and teacher forms, they were completed for students 6 to 18 years old, and the student self-service for the students were 8 to 18 years old. Teachers were also required to know the student for at least 1 month prior to the test and know them very well or moderately well. They also had to have interacted with the student either on a daily, a weekly, or a monthly basis, and with that be able to answer the student's demographic and characteristic data to be able to complete it. For bias prevention, the Connors 4 meets the necessary test standards for psychometric evidence of fairness, as they state. While the demographic characteristics were explored, there were some founded limitations beyond the sample that they did mention. And for the excluded data of the sample, the cases removed were usually due to validity concerns, such as not following directions of eligibility, such as the teacher not knowing the student at all or very well, And also to note that co-occurring non-factored symptoms such as depression with ADHD were at times excluded, but I also felt I needed to mention that, like we mentioned earlier, the negative impression scale is how they measured things, but they originally had to exclude the positive impression scale as it wasn't included for the final testing setup or results. It was excluded because it wasn't effective in distinguishing between participants who were honest answering or faking good. And it uses the negative impression index to evaluate if they may have overreported symptoms and include other measurements for interpretation for the overall results, such as comparing scores to normative samples or an ADHD reference sample. And the technical manual, which can be found online with the kit information, it discusses pretty much what we've talked about thus far about the Connor 4, things such as the administration and the scoring process, the principles of use for the intended purposes, the interpretations of the results and the index scores. In the indexes, once again, it also mentions a lot of information on their bias and their norm sampling and how they can have kind of improved on their last edition of the Connor. And to conclude, the Connor 4 is a very reliable and valid research instrument when used to assess for ADHD in children. It can be applied in a variety of settings, making it well suited for many different uses. And these include research, progress monitoring, clinical assessment, and screening of children with potential ADHD. Thank you for watching our slideshow presentation. And these are our references.